I believe you can now all hear me. Anyway, all right, it wasn't muted. I moved my screens around this morning. This is in a little bit of wet. Let me see. I want this smaller. And if I put it there, is it weird if it's there? Where's the best place for chat to go? Sort of there-ish. There-ish. I need more room on the screen. Hey, so let's move you back a bit. Oh no, let's not do that. You'll see all the nonsense that's out there. I move back. Oh, that's a good idea. There we go. That's a bit better. No, there's no headroom. So I moved everything around now, and I thought I'd got it right. But now there's too much headroom. So give me a second. Let's just twink that a little bit. There we are. That should work. That should be better. What do you think? What do you think? Lower left is where it currently is. Yeah, it's pretty popular, but you might have to zoom out your camera a tiny bit. Yeah. Show off those guns. More like life jackets. I'm not sure. Anyway, glad to see you all here. Glad to see that you are all joining in. Some wonderfully familiar faces. Glad to see you all here. All right, well, we'll get through it. I mean, so I was starting to suffer from like neck things because my screens were... I have 4 screens, and I had them centered in the middle of the desk, so I was actually looking left or looking right when I was doing stuff, and that just didn't work. Thank you, Tesla Ranger. Yes, water wings would, I suppose, be the most appropriate term there. There's still too much headroom, but I suppose I can fix that by doing that. There we go. Bit better. There we are. Now a bit better. Oh, goodness. I see everybody's here. There we go. Oh, I had such a wonderful day. I hope your day has been as good as my day. So I really, really do, because I have had the most amazing day. That I think it was pretty much among the best days I've had in the UK since getting here. Really fantastic day. So yeah, absolutely enjoyed it. Now, if you do have a question, that's fantastic. Please ask the well, when you are asking your question, please put in caps, in giant caps, question in the front of it so I can see it, because you can see I've got it on the side monitor over here. So Watcher2417 is the first off with the questions. And so he says, what do you think of the history of World of Warcraft, and how would you create a story in this universe? So, well, yeah, let's see. First off, thanks to Laura Bones and Landon for showing you how to put a question into... actually, this might be a bit soft if I do this. Thank you to Laura and to Landon for both putting examples of how to write or ask a question. I really thank you for that. So I played World of Warcraft when it first came out, way back when, before you had any mods or anything along those lines. You know, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I had a dwarf who got to level 34, I think. In those days, 60 or 50 was the highest level you could get to. And I played I played Warcraft 2 a lot. I loved that game, I must admit. As for the lore, I'm not entirely sure too much. I mean, the whole idea of the orcs, you know, moving across and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was fine. That was lovely. That was cool. How would I set an adventure in it? Well, I would look at what your party composition is. Is it lots of elves? Is it? I mean, and how far do you go as well? I mean, do you include all of the other races, the night elves, the blood elves? And I think there's lots of interesting lore. Don't get me wrong at all. I think the undead that they did was very cool. The only reason I didn't play an undead, I think, was because my friends were all Alliance, and I wanted to be Horde, but they said no. So lots of lore in there. I would have to do a refresher on World of Warcraft lore, but I think that yeah, choose what's the party composition and then go from there. And I know they've done sort of expansions and they've brought in sort of apocalypses and cataclysms and all those wonderful things. So there is also that as well to bear in mind. So yes, all right. So that's it. There we go. You can see I don't know too much. I'm not comfortable with the knowledge that I have on World of Warcraft, to be perfectly honest with you. I wouldn't do what they did in the movie. I was very disappointed by the movie. I liked it more the second time I watched it. But the first time, I felt they missed a whole lot of tricks. I really did. I thought they missed a whole bunch of stuff. And why we only got to see the other races as background characters is bizarre to me. Anyway. Almighty Om, Almighty Om, yes, Almighty Om, the great god Om. Hello, guy. I have two questions regarding the systems you've tried: Star Wars, Stars Without Number, and Star Wars 5th Edition. They're both very competent. Have either of these taken any interest? I haven't played Stars Without Number, I don't think. And I've looked at the Star Wars 5th Edition conversion. It is the most amazing conversion in terms of the rules that they did. But the book that I looked at in terms of the Star Wars one, they hadn't yet done Starship Combat. And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, that was a good call, because if they wait, until Ghost of Saltmarsh came out, or the book that sort of started to establish how ship combat should work, that would have given them a much stronger option. So I think they could possibly take Nautical Campaigns and use that as their starship combat rule system. I think you'd have a pretty solid game. With regards to Star Wars, in 5th edition, I don't know, Star Wars Saga is not terrible based off of 3.5, so there's definitely something there. For me, I think that would be how I look at it. There's always interest in different role-playing games and that sort of thing. And yes, I mean, at the moment, I've got so many role-playing games to look into that it's absolutely nuts. So yeah, a lot of fun. Absolutely a lot of fun. Well done, everybody. We've reached 100 chats in Restream chat between Twitch and YouTube in under 10 minutes. That's marvelous. Squishy squish. Let me try that again. Squishy Squid says, my players have the tendency to rush through my adventures and therefore dismiss options that would take more than a few hours. How can I make them go slower and be more thorough? Well, so from a player's rushing through to what is their reward for getting to the end? Have you given them too much do you only give them magical items at the end? Another option is that if that's the case, something to do would be to add an NPC to their party on the next one, and as they're rushing through, have the NPC from behind shout, "Hey, we haven't even looked at the last 3 rooms. You go ahead. I'm just going to go and look at them." And then, reveal what was in those other 2 rooms. Have a look at that. Have a look at also, are you driving that pace too much by giving them too much time pressure? You must defeat the evil Duke within 12 hours, in which case they're not going to pause or stop. So look at it from that perspective as well. And then a third option to try would be to not give them any adventure. Let them see where they go. Let them start to discover the wonders of exploring and going off in different directions. But otherwise, it might just be that they like a fast-paced game where they do go through all of the missions and things, especially if they've got a big computer game background, and they're not completionists. They're more like I tend to get once I've been playing a game for a really long time. Like with Skyrim, I've never finished Skyrim, never. Because the main quest, I was like, oh, okay, let me start that. And it just went on and on and on and on. So I'd rather go and do the little shorter quests that had some kind of fulfillment for me. So it could be something like that as well. I see Watch 2417 says there's an addendum, a written story. Well, a written story, again, I would always advocate, if you're going to write a story, write what impassions you. And I remember with World of Warcraft, this was when it first came out, I actually started writing a screenplay about 2 undead who were lovers. and they were invading Alliance territory. And I think they were invading, I want to say Goldstone, Goldspire. What's the starting area for, or the near starting area for humans? Goldshire, I think. Anyway, they were invading Goldshire. That's the one. And the idea of the screenplay was that these two lovers, they had been lovers in life and they were now lovers in undeath, were invading Goldshire, and they were doing some crazy and wonderful things. And the way that they had done that is that they had convinced politics, through politics, they had convinced the Taurens and the Orcs to do a counterattack on the other side, sort of pulling away the human forces. Anyway, I mean so I love the undead, and I couldn't play them with my friends, so it was solo. And in those days, you couldn't. You really couldn't. It was all about just partying up and teaming up. I mean, raids used to be mega. What was it? 40 people in a raid, and you're like, how the hell do you coordinate 40 people's time zones? Anyway, those were in the old days. The old days. Landon says, how do you keep from forgetting triggers during combat? Things happening as well as things like lair actions. Well, I forget them. Usually speaking, I mean, because the biggest thing is that as much as we say, oh, the players must know how their characters work, and the players shouldn't ever slow down and check their character sheets and all that kind of stuff. I'm literally referring to Friday's video, last night's video. As a GM, when it's coming to your monster's turn really should do something. Hey, Forge. Hey, Anvilites. Welcome, Anvilites. Welcome, all of you. Welcome. So there you go. Welcome, Forge. Welcome. Yeah, so write what you love, because that's the best way to do it. Honourable 596 says, what do you think of this lore blurb about my aberrations in the North Pole story? There are places there where the ice walks pools of deeper darkness that whisper terrible secrets, herds of five-legged cattle that silence all around them, fruiting trees that scream and bleed as you harvest them, bushes that grow eyeballs as berries. Well, I think it's a very horrific place, and I think it works perfectly for the aberrations. The five-legged cattle, to be perfectly honest with you, we often, maybe it's me, often have cattle as like the thing, like Fallout had the two-headed cattle and the two-headed deer and the... what about five-legged mammoths or something that live in the cold parts, or polar bears with the bodies of men and the heads of bears, or yeah, play up with it a little bit. Make it feel more like it's in the ice, in the frozen areas. Are there trees that fruit in the frozen areas? But that's if I'm being super critical. Okay, White Tiger 225 says, introducing a friend to D&D. They want to play an evil campaign for their first. Any tips to introduce them to all its concepts? Doing 5th edition. Well, if they want to play an evil campaign, let them play an evil campaign. Just make sure that they realize that they are being evil. Just make sure that they are being evil. And by that I mean, don't try and say, oh, you're an evil genius. But when they kill an innocent, you go, well, the innocent was actually a murderer, so it's okay. Don't you try and justify their evility. Let them see that and let them play on that, because I don't think people realize exactly what an evil campaign is. I think that's particularly difficult. Do they just want to be able to kill people? Is that their goal? They just want to run around and slaughter people and kill and maim and that sort of thing. Or is it that they want to explore the facets of being evil? Do they even understand the precept? So I would talk to them more and find out, when you say evil, what do you mean by evil? Do you want to go and torture people? Do you want to rape people? Do you want to do evil acts? Or are you just wanting something where you are conscience free and just sort of able to do whatever you want? Because that's just an amoral campaign. That's not an evil campaign. If they are genuinely wanting to be evil, that's a different story. So that is something to think about, perhaps. By the way, folks, if I miss your question, please ask it again. Don't worry about spamming, just ask it again. There are 117 people currently watching, and so those questions come through quite thick and fast. And by the time I finish answering one, I've lost half a page of questions. Okay, next question. Gord Instrument, I think. No, Mascaneer Project first. Mascaneer Project says, are you ever going to go back to the cow homework? That's the Circle of World Builders Adventures. I can. I absolutely can. I just thought people might have sort of backed off a little bit from those. So I can certainly go back to them. We've gone back to the creative writing now as of last week. So I think your creative writing exercise this week is going to be quite fun if you're into that sort of thing. We'll do that towards the end of the show. Yeah, so there you are. And next question is from Lagging766. How do you make adventure hooks feel organic? I make adventure hooks feel organic by just bringing them up in casual conversation. So my latest group of players wander into town and they talk to a barkeep. And the barkeep might go, oh, it's terrible bad news, all them sailors, isn't it? That's all you do. That's all you do. Because that's what they would be talking about. That is quite literally all that they would be talking about. If there is something in the bay that's killing sailors. And they can walk past someone putting up a poster. Wanted. Thief. Known to operate in these areas. Reward offered. Don't make it obvious. And sometimes you can make it obvious, by the way. And make sure that that's a deception. So they're walking in the forest and a dryad comes up to them and says, oh, please help me. Someone is chopping down my tree. That is a very obvious plot hook, is it not? Until, of course, they get lured to the side of the road and the dryad turns out to be a goblin in disguise and then the goblins all attack the players. But then, as the players are about to kill the last goblin, please say, no, please don't kill me. I want to live. I don't care if he hunts me down and kills me. I'll tell you who sent us. There's a plot hook. If the players ignore that one, I'd be very impressed. So I think it's about making the world operate as the world would. I mean, you walk into a supermarket and you're chatting to someone about the ridiculous idea of social distancing or, and how people are or are not doing it. And one of them might mention, well, yeah, of course, if I had a car, it'd be different. And I could have got a car, actually. Do you want to buy a car? Not that you should ever follow adventures given to you along those lines. Okay, next question. Luffy Laugh says, have you ever done a campaign in a modern world setting? I have. I have done a vampire campaign in a modern world setting. I've done a lot of one-shots in modern day world. I think modern world, though, the biggest challenge that you have if you don't add in vampires and that sort of thing, it can become quite difficult to sustain over a long period because modern world brings it with a whole bunch of meta expectation. So you fire a gun in a public area. The expectation of reality, the meta, is that the police will respond immediately and they will start hunting you down because you've discharged a firearm in a public space. Whereas if you fire a crossbow in the middle of a square in a fantasy village, how long do the guards take to respond? And is it really illegal? So there's those grey areas which allow for the GM to then fudge it and say yes or no. But in places where, in spaces where we have known quantities, it becomes difficult to kind of ignore those. And it's like, well, really, if you steal a jet from an airport, they will scramble other helicopters to find you, or the military might, so anyway. But yeah. I haven't run any long-term campaigns. The vampire ones were the ones that ran the longest, I think. But that's because you could then delve into the secret side of things and you could mind control the police and, so there you go. All right. Crow8417 says, I have players who have expressed that they invest their own personalities in their characters and do not want their characters to die no matter what. One is also my GM. How do I try to broach the subject of exposing their characters to mortal risk? And how do I broach the related subject of my own character's possibility of dying? I feel it takes the fun from the game if my character has no chance of dying. I completely agree with you. Absolutely. It does take away any form of risk. And why bother if you if your character can't die, then you can push it to very large extremes. I started watching a film last night. Was it last night? The night before? Was Charlize Theron. It was last night before I went to bed early. And what was it called? It's the new one on Netflix. Something across thing. Anyway, that might be something to watch to get inspiration on. But if the rest of your group are adamant that they don't want to die, then there's nothing you can do to convince them that would make it more fun. There really wouldn't be anything. Because ultimately what will then happen is if the GM hasn't bought into it, the old guard, thank you, Mr. Rogers' neighbour, the old guard, drugged dwarf got there as well, thank you. If the GM doesn't want to kill them, then there's very little that you can say to convince them otherwise. And, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, as much as we like to pretend when we're role-playing that we're role-playing somebody else, our problem-solving skills are our problem-solving skills. And we might solve the problem and keep quiet that our character's not intelligent enough to solve that problem. But, yeah, is it really us role-playing? I don't know. Nick Pascuzzi says, what are some of your personal favorite NPCs that you come up with, and how did you do so? My NPCs are 99.999999% of the time come up with on the fly, as they are needed, as the PCs encounter them. One that I particularly enjoyed was a guard, and the guard became a long-term NPC to a degree, was a character named Alad, and he was a guard. And the only reason why he became an NPC of note was because I needed the NPC to be particularly stupid and very trustworthy, or trusting, I should say, so that the PCs could sweet talk their way out of prison. And that was exactly what happened. And Alad, they sweet talked their way out of prison, and then he followed them, and they asked him his name, and I didn't know what his name should be, so I just said, my name's Alad, because when I was born, my dad said, "Oh, it's an Alad," or "It's Alad," and so I've always had an Alad. Alad is my name, and this was a live show for Ghosts of Saltmarsh for D&D, and people loved Alad, so he became one. Chef. I don't think he ever actually had a name. Chef was just a chef on the ship in the same campaign. And he was just this very hyper-obsessive chef who got very upset when people didn't give him enough warning, enough time to prepare good quality meals. And he would scream and shout at the crew, and he didn't care about their rank. He didn't care about anything like that. If they asked him for a sandwich too early, he would just fly into a rage with this ridiculous French accent. And Cookie, as AK Writer has mentioned there. So yeah, I generally very seldom plan them. Another one that I enjoyed because the player enjoyed him so much was the god. I don't even remember his name, Raru or something like that. He was the god for Mutaru, who was one of the characters in a very early game that I ran on this channel a long time ago. Who had my typical Chinese accent, but this god was so frustrated with the character's player that he personally visited the character when the character was dying and told him to work better and be better and stop trying to be a fighter because he was a warlock. And that was an interesting one for me because I hadn't ever done that before, and what it allowed me to do was to be able to tell the player via their character's divine experience that they were stepping beyond bounds, and that they not bounds, that they had created a character that they were trying to fit into a different role because they didn't want to be left out. And I think that was very, very useful for me. And I don't know why. I think this is because I like to use the character as a mirror and as a sounding board, which was a youth. So he might be called Mios, or he might be called Alexei, or whatever his name is. It just depends on the campaign. but it's a sort of pubescent 14, 15-year-old who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and super eager to help people, but is not very good at anything. And over the duration of the campaign, if he's included, he will grow and start to develop a personality and start to develop skills and focus on those. And I've used him as a guide where he's been guiding the players in terms of world history and giving them information, world dumping, basically. I've used him as comic relief. So I do that kind of stuff quite often. I think the other one that I do, and I don't, when I say quite a lot, I mean I've used him twice, is the horny Beast of Burden. So, who sounds like Sean Connery. So, he's been Donkey, where he was a donkey and he was just wandering around, you know, doing his thing. And he's been a Bardesian horse who talks, this great steed of power. Yeah, so I use those as well. I use that as well, especially in the smaller groups where they can have a conversation with their horse. And then that usually acts just as a giant logic board where the horse is like, well, I would just eat him or kill him or shag him or what, you know. So, and that's often a lot of fun as well. So there you are. Grizzle says, if you intend to make a player's weapon a legendary item in the future, what hints would you give and what would you guide them towards doing? I would have NPCs. I would have NPCs going, you've got that blade? Are you nuts? Do you see the forge on that? The tint on that metal? That's got to be dwarven craftsmanship, that is. That's got to be the most beautiful weapon I've ever seen. If that doesn't lead to a legend, I don't know what will. So I would have NPCs do that. I would have NPCs do that. And have them react, have them appraise, have them try and steal it. Make it of value to the PC, and then whatever its future is, it doesn't really matter. It will just be even sweeter. Infernal Text says, are nuanced big bad endgame bosses with shades of grey, or are black and white ones better? I don't think the PCs necessarily care about shades of grey. If their goal is set on destroying or killing or slaying, whether the vampire has a tragic story or not, I don't see why the PCs would stop. I have, now that I think about it, I have had PCs change sides when they realized that the big bad was was actually correct. But it's very dangerous and it's very tricky. If they swap sides, what do you now do? Because now what was the antagonistic force for the bad guy, the thing that was preventing them from winning, has now been removed. Usually it's the PCs that do that. So it can be tricky. And I also kind of go, you know, when the PCs execute someone or when they fight them to the death, if they do that knowing that the person is evil, it's a lot better than if there's ambiguity and they're going, well, I really don't think we should kill him, because the biggest risk you run is a split party on that. So not split parties and they're going in different directions, but as in they believe differently. I don't think we should kill him. I agree with him. I think he's right, as opposed to I want to kill him because I think he's evil. So that is tricky. M. Danica 13 says, have you had any experience with Star Trek Adventures since your alpha testing a few years ago? I haven't. I absolutely haven't, to be honest with you. I was actually chatting to the guys from Modifius the other day, and they've got some interesting and cool things coming up in the near future. So yeah, I always thought that it would be interesting to go back and to have a look and see. But you can't really see it. But these two books here, this blue one and that red one, those are the original Star Trek Coda rule books. Which I absolutely loved. Their ship combat system in that book was absolutely brilliant. It was completely inspirational behind nautical campaigns as well. Der Krishka says, will there be a Hello World again? I don't think so. I think that it was a lot of fun whilst we were doing it, but I do think that it's about timings, If you look at World Anvil, they're very busy on their streaming side of things. I know KO is busy on his kind of stuff, as am I. And these things they happen, they flourish, and then they move on. And we find new projects, new partners to do cool stuff with. And I think that's good. I think it means you don't get these sort of stale repeats. GM Brightside says, what are your thoughts on the impact Critical Role, the Matt Mercer effect, has had on TTRPGs? It's an interesting one, I must admit. And I'm not convinced that... Well, okay, let me rephrase that. So I feel that however people are finding role-playing, whether it's something like Stranger Things, where role-playing is something that's happening in the game and people sort of think it could be quite fun to do. I've heard a lot of people talk about that as being like a mainstream key-in to getting into the hobby. And that drives people to YouTube to try and find out more. And then they find Critical Role and that kind of builds them in or not. I cannot say that it has ever been negative. I don't think it's negative. To have the mainstream stuff happening, Joe DiMaggio, is it not Joe DiMaggio? He was a baseball player. Joe Manganiello, his kind of drive, the other actors that are driving it as well, making it more mainstream, making it more of something that people go, oh yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, yeah, that's that thing, yeah, as opposed to Dungeons and Dragons, that evil thing of darkness, and I think that's positive. I think that's absolutely positive. I don't know if they've had any effect in terms of TTRPGs, in terms of how they're written and that sort of thing. But I mean, that's just my experience of it. Next question. Jesse Sinclair says, new DM here. Well, that's awesome. Well done for being a GM nonetheless. Any advice for running a campaign with only 2 PCs? Yeah. So smaller groups means more intimate stories. And I don't mean now every scene is going to be a sexual scene. By intimate, I mean the story is much more focused around these 2 people. Think of it now as a Hollywood blockbuster movie, where you've got the 2 characters that are going to be facing off against the world. So to be perfectly honest with you, if you are a new GM, find a film from the 80s, maybe from the 90s. Look at some B-grade films, especially those that were made in sort of Italy and that sort of thing, and that were dubbed into English. You can go back into the 1970s as well. And watch one of those films where there's the lead actor and the support, the sidekick type of thing. And even try and run a game based off of those movies if you're looking for inspiration. So yeah, try that out. But because you've only got 2 characters, it's really about their story. And you're going to have to do a lot more work, by the way, because those 2 characters, it means that your combat is going to be over in, each round anyway, is going to be over in 2 minutes. So a 10-round combat is only 20 minutes. Whereas if you have 4 players, suddenly a 10-round combat is almost an hour. So your game is going to run a lot faster. So you're going to need to have not more preparation. No. But I would suggest watching my videos that you can find on YouTube, on youtube.com/how to be a great GM, how to be a great game master. There are tips there on the 5-step method, the 5 steps. You're going to need to have those in place because your guys are going to be moving much, much faster through your plots, much, much faster through all of your clues than a bigger group, because there's less of them, there's less debate, there's less different insight, there's less of that kind of stuff. The party, if they do split, you're only dealing with 2 people, as opposed to if you have 4 people, you're dealing with 4 different stories. So I think that's the biggest thing that you're going to need to look at. Drug Dwarf says, who is on your Twitch team? Are you doing all of this yourself? I'm not sure what you mean by that. We've got a few friendly folk. Laura Bones is a moderator. I believe she has the power of the dark side to kick people off and do sorts of wonderful things. But otherwise, it's just me. I don't know what sort of other team you'd like. I mean, I have the Web Goblin, of course, but he just pays the checks. So there you are. No, he does so much more than that. Oh, I'm so excited for what's coming up in the future. I wonder if I can share it with you. I think I can. RPGTableFinder.com, which is our find your groups to play with, is going away. But it's being replaced by something new. And yeah, it's very, very exciting. It's being replaced by something new, which will effectively expand whom you can play with. So I'm very excited about that. He's busy working on that at the moment. So yeah, that's going to be something very, very interesting. An important hero. Hello, an important hero. I saw your tweet, by the way, and I was quite interested to see what kind of feedback you got on that. Anyway, crumpets or biscuits? Follow-up. If you were teleported to your homebrew world, oh my god, what comfort food would have to be there for you to adjust easily? Crumpets or biscuits? It depends. Because I can eat a box of biscuits in one sitting. I can also eat as many crumpets as you can give me in one sitting, because I love crumpets. If it was, which is better? A peanut butter biscuit, because peanut butter biscuits are, or ginger biscuits. I mean, those two rank right up at the top there. Or a crumpet with a little bit of butter, maybe a little bit of jam on it. Oh my goodness, I'm salivating. What about a crumpet with a biscuit on it? No, that's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Better to have a biscuit with a crumpet on it. Yeah, that makes more sense. What comfort food would I have to have in order to be there to adjust easily? I would need there to be roast lamb and roast potatoes and rosemary and thyme and mint. I think those are the critical things. Yes. So I think roast leg of lamb is for me the biggest thing. I couldn't get that in Japan. I could not get that. Yeah. It just wasn't an option. The closest we got was Australia through a lamb day. They called it Lambassador Day, where they brought Australian lamb to Japan. But then it was kebabs and it was Japanese centric, so it didn't sort of really count. Samuel Cohen asks, how to find inspiration for a rival for my character, a catfolk rogue. What do you mean by for your rival? Are you making a backstory? Because if you're making a backstory, I would say, well, you need to have as a rival someone who is going to be what you fear the most in becoming. So if you think about a rival, rivals usually are very much the opposite, or very much what you fear you are. That's what usually makes you angry towards those rivals. So I would think about that. If the catfolk rogue is someone who is fearful that people think that they're a fraud, then the villain, your rival, should be a fraudster, someone who's completely fake. I hope that makes sense. Laura Bones, one day, I expect to get together with you and to have scones with jam and cream at some point. Because you know that I've been in England now for, 8 months, and I still haven't had scones with jam and cream. And I don't care what anyone says, it's a scone, not a scone. I was always raised with that. Lance Pickett says, how do you follow an amazing session full of emotion to the point of exhaustion, totally fulfilling, without being a complete letdown? Make it a downtime episode. Make your session a downtime session. Make the player, give them the opportunity of going shopping, give them the opportunity of resting up, let them receive letters from home. Make it a reflection period. And if you watch a film or a TV series, this is the exact thing that they do, is that there will be high tension, high drama, high action, and then the immediate next period will be something that's quiet and soft and full of contemplation. And there's a reason for that. As humans, we need to have those roller coasters, but we need the downtime so we can actually reflect on the amazing time. Don't try and follow it up with an amazing, do not ever try and follow it up with something more dynamic or more brilliant or bigger and more dramatic. Don't do that, because you won't do it. You won't do it. All you do is you are diminishing the previous session, which was so amazing, and you're then letting the session down. So that would be my suggestion. Okay, we really need to stop talking about food now, because I realized today, I have to share my day with you today. It was just magic. I leisurely got up this morning. Then I had 5 amazing people come around, because they're not allowed to gather in more than 6. So it was 4 of them and me. Come around, and we played doubles tennis for about almost 2 hours. And then we came and played board games. We played a board game. We played Spartacus. And it was the first time that 3 of them had ever played, because one of them left. But it was the first time that 3 of them had ever played Spartacus, the board game. And if you haven't played Spartacus, the board game, it is a game where you openly backstab each other. And you make deals and immediately turn around and betray the deal. It is, I consider it one of the greatest role-playing board games ever if you want to play an evil character. Because that is exactly what it is. You are cutthroat, you are ruthless, you are executing slaves. I sold 3 slaves to the salt mines because I wanted to be a little bit more famous than my, it really is a great session. I mean, and then I'm finishing off with a show tonight. I mean, how wonderful is that? Today, and the weather was just perfect. The English lie. They keep saying, oh, it's not normally like this. And you're like, please. It's been like this for 8 months. I mean, it was a little bit miserable in January, but otherwise it's been perfectly lovely weather. Anyway, sorry for breaking away. Back to questions. Ben Nicholson says, important question. What order do you put the cream and jam on your scones? Well, it's jam first because the cream has to stick to the jam. At least that's my thinking. Yeah, definitely. It's butter, then it's jam, then it's cream. Yes, that's the usual order. That's how you get a heart attack. Yes, and if you ever want to know how to get fat, the easiest way to get fat is to have a friend. She and I used to go to the mall, and we would walk from one side of the mall all the way to the other side of the mall, and we would get to this little restaurant called Le Petit, and I understand the irony in the name of that little restaurant. And we would get to this restaurant and we go, we must have burned off so many calories walking from one end to the other. We deserve a little something. And then we're going to have scones and tea. It was marvellous. Anyway, right. Laura Bone says, I'm going down to London Way in November to visit some friends. I could maybe call in then. Yes, absolutely. We'll see who's around. Yeah, we'll do a thing. Not more than 5 people or 6 people, but we'll do a thing. For those of you that don't know, the UK, our COVID thing is starting to go back up again. We're getting more infections than when we were, whatever. And so now we're only limited to 6 people in a group, no more than. So we shall see. Right. Next question that I see. This is from White Tiger 225. I have a lawful good, very motherly life cleric centaur. I wanted her to keep spices with her to aid in cooking, but the spice will decide what she cooks. What spice do you suggest? Interesting. I wonder if it might not be more entertaining if she had, what do they call it? Comfort food spices. So maybe she would have some kind of chili spice, chili powder, ground chili peppers, or she could call them sharp hoof, or bright mane powder, which is like a chili powder for fun moments. She could have I don't know, I would play along those lines, and that when they were designed that, everyone's feeling a little bit down because we lost the battle, right, bright mane porridge, or etc. Because I learned today the definition of porridge in different countries is very different. I got stuck watching this video, and I thought my early videos were bad. This was awfully done in terms of audio, but it was Viking cooking, and it's this group of people, I think they're in Sweden or in Norway, Gotland. So if you are from that area, is Gotland Swedish? I want to say yes, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I think it is. Isn't that in Gotland where they do their big festival every year? Now that starts to ring a bell. Nonetheless. And it was how they were cooking Viking. Okay, GG Games, thank you. It is Swedish. Gotland is Swedish. and it was about how they were cooking Viking porridge. And the contents were wheat. Well, no surprises there. That's the basic porridge. And as far as I know, that's as far as it goes. But they took it further. So they had wheat, they had venison, and they had cheese. What was the other thing that they had? And spices. And that was it. And it's like, that's porridge, but it's venison flavored with cheese. Oh my God, it looked amazing. So yes, why am I making you hungry? I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm going to have to find something because I don't have any food in the house. I've got bread. I'm going to have toast for dinner tonight. Jose Ramirez says, or Josu Ramirez, I should say, the monk PC is training under a monk master. How do I make it interesting for the monk PC and include the other PCs, the wizard, the druid, and the rogue, in the monastery's affairs? Okay, it's a great question because this does definitely come up often. Where you have the one character who's gone on a quest to find their inner power, and they're now in the temple and all that kind of stuff. So, firstly, the group is going to be split. That's going to happen. The monk is going to go off with the master, and then the others are going to come along. One session, I would deal with the split, and I would have the wizard, the druid, and the rogue. I would have one of the other monks come to them and say, "You are not of the temple. There is something that you could do for me, which would be of great benefit. I cannot ask the others, for it violates our code." Immediately, it's going to pull them in because it's like, oh, it's what? It violates. Laura Bones, toodaloo, see you later. Let me know about November. And so you send them on a little quest, just a small little quest. Perhaps it's to the monk's parents because they're no longer allowed to talk to their parents. He just needs to know if his sister passed her knight qualification and is now a great knight, or something like, something just fun and simple. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to bounce from the monk who is studying to be this great monk, and you're getting them to do skill challenges, you're getting them to do willpower or wisdom or whatever your self-control ability is, whatever system you're using. And the others are now going off on a side quest. They need to take a letter, and on the way they get waylaid by bandits, give them some combat. And what you try and do is you stagger it. So when they are doing skill checks to find the path that will lead them to this brother, this sister or whatever, you do skill checks with the monk PC. When they engage with combat with the bandits, you do combat with the monk PC where he's facing off against the master in the traditional showdown between master and apprentice. So you mirror what is happening in the monastery with what is happening outside of the monastery. And you literally just bounce between the two groups until eventually it comes to a conclusion. Then the second session, because you don't really want it to take too long in terms of the monk training. I mean, yes, we know mastery takes years, but unless that's what your campaign is about, you want to do that. So then the second session, when the PCs arrive, you tell the monk player to go make coffee or to take their headphones off or whatever it is. And then you tell the other PCs, the three of you need to attack and take down this monk. You know that all of it is non-bludgeoning, and you will tell the PCs that although your characters have all of the abilities and the skills and the values that the character sheet has, to save time, they are actually playing the roles of three monks within the monastery. And so now that PC monk has to fight against the three. And give them an opportunity to lay some traps, give them a floor plan, ask them what they're going to be doing. It does take a little bit of setup, but have the other player, again, like I said, headphones off and that sort of thing. And I think that that will be an amazing session. I think that'll be a lot of fun, especially when the monk PC is defeated. Because whether he defeats all of the other three or whether he himself or she or they are defeated is immaterial. Because, of course, it is not whether you win or lose. It is how you choose to face adversity that is the true lesson. Now go! You have learnt enough from me for this decade, and I have a headache. And then send them off on their way, and then you're done. So the players are all involved, and it's just a lot of fun. So that's my suggestion. Okay, Thanos103 says, how do you establish an encounter with gods where there are 5 gods, 4 meet the players, but unknown by all, the 5th god is secretly behind the great evil in the world? How do you establish an encounter? Well, It depends on your gods. Are they the type who would embody something? So the party comes across a randy goose and he says, "Hi, I'm Zeus." Or do they come across a bunch of beggars? Do they suddenly have a celestial visitation around their campfire? What is where does that all come from? In terms of the god's attitude towards the minions, why are they then meeting with the characters? That's another question. Do they need help? Is this fifth god too powerful? Are they giving warning? Are they giving items? So yes, I would answer that question first and then determine how to go from there. RPG Zoo, just in case you get worried. I did say Zeus. Yes, Zeus traditionally used to take. There's one painting, very famous painting, where he's a goose, and he went and had his way with human females because apparently geese were hot in ancient Greece. I don't know. Richard Maple says, recently watched your video on pacing. Fantastic. And was wondering how you manage speeding up pace when the party gets deadlocked in arguments. Do you have pre-written markers? This happens a lot. Well, yes. So I have there's a video on the YouTube channel called The 5 Steps, or a really old one called the 1-2-2 and the 1-2-1 method. And those give you all of the different steps. Now you can go to my website, www.greatgamemaster.com, and there's a great library tab, and in that you'll see that there are templates, and there's the 5-step template, and that literally gives you all those markers. And as I said in the videos, if your party is in deadlock, do not be afraid to throw something in, or just to stop the game and say, folks, this is deadlock. Resolve this now. What do you want to do? 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 Done. So I would look at it that way. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. I've got 2 more questions, and then we're going to go to creative writing. Thanos 103 says, what do you do in this situation as a player? Okay. You fall through the floor of the chapel into the crypt, where you see a pulsing grey water floating in the middle of a glass tube, which you instantly recognize as antimatter, which will clearly destroy the city times 10. The timer is counting down from 24 hours, and it is at 0020, leaving 20 minutes until boom. Ha ha ha. Wanting an idea how the player should overcome the situation, as the city population is over 1 million. Well, if we're dealing with antimatter, it means there's some kind of science around, I assume, that we could use, and depends on the player's skills and if the player is alone or not. But as a player, the very first thing that I would do would be to check if there's an on-off switch. And another option would be to try and rip the antimatter container out of the structure without it spilling, because it's obviously being held within the gravimetric field, and assumedly the gravimetric field is what's going to collapse and cause the antimatter to drop into it, which is what RPG Zoo, I think, is heading towards. So yeah, I would try and look at that. Maybe there is something in the room that could be turned into a giant magnet. Maybe there's coils of copper wire, or there's some kind of science roll that the character can make that would create a second magnetic constrictor, if you like. So yeah, I think that's what I would do. I think. Lord Tuber says, the cleric in my party, after some great role-playing, is changing her god and signing a pact with Asmodeus. The problem is that I'm nowhere near as smart as Asmodeus, nor charming. How do I properly role-play someone smarter and more charismatic than I am? Lord Tuber, I would recommend that you watch the TV series Lucifer. Lucifer was my inspiration behind my devils when I was running my Avernus campaign and Asmodeus was running around, and that was really, really, really good, in my opinion, because yeah, that was It was good inspiration in terms of getting into the head of devils, that they're not evil. They have goals and objectives that make sense to them, and they don't need to give all of that information to the players. So I think in terms of how do you do it as they're smarter than you, you don't have to worry about that. They are automatically smarter than the player character, not by virtue of figuring out plots or anything, but because they have the meta knowledge that the GM has. So Asmodeus can have an escape plan that the PCs know nothing about because you've just made it up now. It needs to fit somehow into context and that sort of thing. But you have the knowledge of what's coming up, and that means Asmodeus technically has that same power. So don't worry about trying to be smarter. You already are, because you know what's coming up. Anyway, right. I think that's it for questions. I'm just looking. Yeah, Damnifer was a lot of fun to play. What is it that you truly desire? Yes, so the new series is out. I started watching it, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not that excited. I'm not that excited. To be honest, I was kind of like expecting more, and yet it's the same, which is comforting in one way, but in another it's like, I don't know. Okay, so creative writing, we're going to do this very, very quickly because we're coming towards the end of the show today. We're going to go over a little bit, but creative writing for today, if you don't know what creative writing is, this is where I give you a creative writing challenge to flex your GM abilities or your player abilities in terms of making up stories and looking at things from a different angle. And it's always with the intention that you will take away a skill that you can now apply moving forward to your role-playing, where you can look at stuff from perhaps a different perspective. Okay. So this one is a little bit tricky. So I'm going to put it into the chat so you have access to it, right? This is something that you can use when you are trying to solve a murder or when you are trying to create one. I will give you the first clue. There's the first clue. A witch is murdered. Let me give you another clue. These are all based on tropes, okay? That we get in most literature. 3 gnomes with a broken clock. And then the last one is blood on the road. So a witch is murdered, 3 gnomes with a broken clock, blood on the road. That is, if you were reading a murder mystery, whether it's from Agatha Christie to Sherlock Holmes, or you are creating one, or anything along those lines, those 3 clues will be critical in solving it. We have a victim. Now, the victim might not be present. There are times when authors have gone, well, there's no one, we don't know if anyone's been murdered or not, but we're fairly certain a murder has happened, but we don't have the body. We just have blood on the carpet, blood on the floor, blood on the ceiling, blood somewhere. Blood is usually an indicator of death, right? A broken clock. It's symbolic of time. Right? So your task in creative writing is to link the 3 together somehow. You cannot say 3 gnomes with a broken clock murdered a witch on the road. That's too straightforward. No murder mystery would ever do that. So look at those 3 clues and figure out what kind of story you can tell me based on that. So have a think. It can be a little bit tricky. Now, whilst that's going on, I'm going to answer 2 more questions that have come through. So you don't have to participate if you don't want to, by the way. You can just listen and watch and see what people do. But once you've got your story, drop it into the chat. And remember, you are restricted by how many characters you can enter. So keep it succinct. And if you like, you can just acronym it. So a witch is murdered becomes AWIS, AWIM, 3 gnomes with a broken clock, TGWABC, although you'd lose the A. Anyway, so yes. A cuckoo clock could also be the sign of insanity. Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Lance Carnivan asks, whilst you guys are busy working on your creative writing, Lance Carnivan asks, I was playing a changeling. Everyone out of game knows this, but their characters do not. I plan on them finding out at some point, but I do not know how. Any suggestions? The immediate one that comes to mind is the usual one. When one of your companions is in a danger, a risky spot, or something along those lines, you change into something else. Another option could be, if you need to find information out desperately, is to go in, change form into the milkmaid and get that information, and then come back and confess that you have certain powers. I think a more interesting one, a more dramatic one, could be to take one of the PCs aside and then quietly confess that your characters are changing, that you're terrified that the rest of the party, when they find out, is going to throw you out. That creates some very interesting role-playing. It's a wonderfully awkward scene, but it's very reminiscent of what I think we all go through in life at one stage or another, where we admit that we have a thing. Secretly, I like to watch ice hockey, something that we think people are going to laugh at us for, and the like. So that could be a lot of fun. So have a look at that. Dekrishka says, I have to know, was Damnifer a pun with damn, like the lost and the damned? Yes, absolutely. Well, not so much of a pun, more as a direct clue. So Damnifer was this devil in one of my campaigns who was luring and tempting the PCs. I specifically chose to give him the name Damnifer because I needed a shorthand to tell those who were watching that this is an evil character and that he was manipulating the PCs. But I also gave him the name Damnifer because it immediately told the PCs this is someone who is evil. And yet they all still trusted him and tried to ingratiate themselves with him to some degree or not, or fought back against him. Right? So there you go. There you go. But yes, originally it was, it's definitely, the name was chosen very specifically for that. Because he was the big bad. So I had listed him for there. Excuse me, I did not trust him, says Friendly Gonzo. There we go, hello, Friendly Gonzo. I murdered that devil man and I enjoyed it very much. Well, yes, absolutely. But I think, so that's why I'm saying some did not. Yes, there was a lot of murder going on, which I thought was really fun. And it worked really well. It did work really well to drive that. Okay, let's see. And I do hope that you're doing well, by the way, Friendly Gonzo. Good to see you in the chat. So have we got no submissions? Oh, there we go. Here comes some submissions in terms of how these all link together. I see this one was certainly pulling on the thought, the mental processes of everybody. Okay, SW Ont Gamer says, only in South Africa would ice hockey be bad. Fun fact, the Ice Hockey World Championship was the first international sporting event post-apartheid South Africa held. Well, absolutely, but also I remember that the son of one of my bosses used to play ice hockey in Durban in hellish heat in the skating rink. I always thought that was particularly interesting. Writing, here's White Tiger 225's inclusion. Despite the nature of the broken clock, it still ticked within. After the earthquake that shook the city, the clock's hands were frozen in time. The blood on the road carried the connotation that the witch's body was moved. And then there is the youth, Kryn. Scared and nervous, he said he was protecting his home from looters at 3 o'clock, staying at home until 4. You figure it would take an hour to move the witch's body to where it was found, and the earthquake happened at 4, not at 3. Bingo. Okay, there we go. Very good. Very, very good option. Jose Romero says, a witch was found murdered in front of the Tower of Sands and was reported by the gnomes with a broken clock. There is blood on the road, but the witch was strangled to death with no wounds. Okay. I like where you're going with that. I do like where you're going with that. I feel that the linking of the gnomes with the broken clock could be used a little bit better. There could be something more to that, which I quite like. It could also, and we could fix that very easily by saying that the gnomes reported that the witch was found murdered. They reported it at 5 p.m., but claimed that they had only got to the body, let's say, at 3 p.m. and on the clock it's stuck at 4 p.m., which could indicate that they were fighting the witch and she broke their clock at 4 p.m. when she then died because the gnomes killed her. The blood on the road, I think, is a nice red herring. Absolutely, we can certainly do that. Lance Pickett says, the gnomes stand transfixed by the clock tower, its hands now fixed at 6:30. Not even seeing the wise woman laying at the base of the tower, they all seemed to see was the blood dripping from the clock's hands onto the road. Yes, very nice. So there you linking it all together in terms of creating the scene that our PCs now come stumbling across on. I assume the witch flew into the clock tower on her broomstick. Where is the missing broomstick? That's an interesting one. Let's see. Dekrishka says, bloody streaks on the road make a village paranoid. After the inhabitants kill the local wise woman in the forest, the time wizard regrets creating a time-changing clock and letting it get stolen. Ah, that's a fun one. That recalls the movie Time Bandits. That very interesting Terry Gilliam film from the 80s. So yes, that's great. These are great. Look at this. Mascaneer Project says, 3 gnomes looked deep into their broken clock to foresee the events of the upcoming week. They saw that early in the week. They would be imprisoned for the murder of the most famous witch. Yes, I think that's lovely. That's very nice. We've got a whole time travel thing coming in there. Look at this, folks. This is the power that we have as storytellers. It's so cool. I love doing this. I love this exercise. AK Writer says, blood was on the road. A man screamed and the guard arrived. After some time they found the corpse. A green-skinned cliche witch lay in the alley behind a club. Soon the chief inspector chooses to investigate the club, where a band called 3 Goblins and a Broken Clock performed that night. He talked to all 3 members of the band, all humans, and then the barkeep, who was actually a goblin on a stool. Among the other guests, a werewolf, a necromancer, and a vampire. And I would add in, and 3 gnomes, just to bring it back to the original. But I think that's lovely. Absolutely lovely. That's a typical murder detective sort of story happening there. Isn't it just brilliant? So, yeah, folks, thank you for your submissions. They're lovely. They're always fun to read and to look at and to see that it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what you're doing. Just plug 3 random things together and you will get a story. You will get a story. Robert Reaper, the last one coming through there before I finish off tonight's show. The clocksman was travelling down the street when he spied a magic battle before him. Terrified, he turned and ran, dropping his clock as he did so. He told the guard that he saw a woman and 3 small people fighting with magic. But when they returned to the scene, there was only blood and a broken clock. Very good. Very, very good. Absolutely cool. I think that's a good one to finish off on, because that's great. That one, to a large degree, sets up a whole bunch of things. No one's there. There's no body. So there's just this blood. So who died? Did someone die? Did they win? Did they lose? Very, very nice. Very, very, very nice. So there we go. Folks, it's got to come to an end, and this is the end, unfortunately. So thank you all for your wonderful questions. And if I didn't get to your question, I do apologize. I really wish I could have. But as you see, it takes time to answer all of these wonderful things. And yes, I'm definitely going to go and find food now. There's no doubt about that. Next week is going to be an interesting one. I think he lied. Maybe it's next week. Is it next week? Could be next week. Next week's going to be interesting from a live stream perspective. I've got a guest coming onto the show. What did you guys think of Alan, by the way? Alan, the coach DM, the coach, or the GM coach, the DM coach, I think. He had an absolute blast on the show. But yeah, do you want me to get more people on? Did you enjoy that? Did you like that? Or should it just remain just me and you and all other 120 people? Let me know, because then I will reach out to more people. I mean, that's one of the joys that we have, is being able to say, right, let's bring in folks, let's have a look and let's see and that sort of thing. Even if he has a terrible iPhone, he is an iPhone fan, And he was on my show? Oh, well, if I'd known that. Yeah, I think Lance has got it. I think Mr. Rogers' Neighbour's got it. Yeah, maybe once a month or so. I'll try and do that. I'll try and reach out to more people and line up, because it does become fun. It does become fun. Okay, good. Well, there we go. I purchased a camera for him so he didn't record on his iPhone. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, that's very generous of you, RPG Zoo. No, well, look, I mean, the phone tech quality is amazing. When I go back, there's a reason why I'm redoing my old videos. Like this week's pacing video was a redo, and I'm glad I redid it, because I think it's a better video than the first one, because I think I know more on how to present on YouTube and make things a little bit clearer. Although there was an awful example where I got stuck in the markers, and it's like, is this marker before that marker? But and of course the whole thing was live streamed. I mean, that was a disaster. I am so, you know how close it came. I mean, imagine if I don't know. I mean, what you do in your own home, I'm not saying anything shady, but yeah, I just did not know I was live streaming. Anyway, lots of fun. Right, life evolves, people grow, says Lance Pickett. People grow and people go, and I'm going to go on that note. So thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you on Wednesday for the live playthrough of our D&D 5th edition game. 4 players about to get thrown into a very interesting aquatic adventure, I think. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.